I remember when I was a little girl, my family and I lived in a trailer at the end of the church that my dad pastored at the time. And I was just a little girl, and my dad was building at the end of the trailer a deck off of the back door. And I would go in the front door of the trailer, which was on the long side, and I would run down the hall to that door that was open where he was out there working. And I would stop in the door and I would say, "Daddy, catch me." He would turn around, I would jump, he would catch me and put me down. And I kept doing this for a series of moments. I'm sure I'm the reason it took him a little longer than he anticipated to build the deck. But at any rate, he would so patient with me in that moment, and he would catch me and put me down. And there was one particular time when I was doing this that I went in the front door of the trailer and I ran down the hall. And as I'm jumping out of the door, already, my feet have left the ground mid-flight, I say, "Daddy, catch me." Well, he wasn't prepared, but he dropped everything. He turned around, grabbed me, and he fell to the ground and cushioned my fall. The fact of the matter is, he was my dad, and I trusted him. There was no plan B. I'm reminded of a story that I heard a minister share once. I don't know who it was, and I don't know if this is a true story or an analogy that he used, but he was talking about there was a man who was on an airplane, and he was seated next to a little girl who obviously had been seated there by the flight attendants. And he said at some point in the process of this flight, the stewardess came on the system and she announced that we're about to go through some really severe turbulence, and there's rain and storms, and we're working our way through them, but just be prepared, all of that sort of thing. And so he, of course, tightened his seatbelt, and it got pretty turbulent. They were bumping all around, and you could just tell everybody was really nervous. The whole time this was happening, the little girl was sitting in her seat just playing with her dolls, with her Barbies, just playing, having a good time, not realizing that all of the adults on the flight were panicking and nervous and sweating and all of that. When it all calmed down, he looked at the little girl and he said, "Wow, I noticed you didn't even get scared. Good job." He was trying to encourage her in her bravery. And she looked at him and said, "Oh." She said, "Well, my dad's the pilot, and when we got on this plane, he told me that he was taking me home tonight." Absolute trust, because that was her dad, and there was no plan B. There's no plan B. That's what I want to talk to you about for just a moment. No plan B in our lives. What do I mean by plan B? Well, it's that thing that you kind of keep in your possession in case plan A doesn't work out. It's the phone number that you might keep handy just in case you need it. Or maybe it's that list of steps that you need to do in case God doesn't answer the request that you've been putting before him for a while. And if he doesn't come through quick enough or how you think he should, well, you've got this plan B. You've got some options you can try. Look, I'm not opposed to things that we do. I know there are biblical disciplines, things that we literally do, but that all comes out of plan A, which is our faith properly placed in Jesus Christ and what he's already done for us at the cross of Calvary. In fact, when we have proper faith, it produces proper works. We don't have to flip that around and think that we get all of our works and our list in order, and then God comes through because we did our part. No, he did everything that's required. He made it possible for us to live in plan A every day of our lives. We don't have to live with plan B. And when we make up our mind to trust and obey, as the old song says, then we destroy plan B, whatever it is, right? Trust and obey. For there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. I want to look for a moment in a passage in Genesis chapter 22. This is the story of Abraham and Isaac. It's a very common story. Sermon after sermon has been preached on it. There's so many things you could pull out of this passage, but just for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to pull something out of it that stood out to me, that really got me thinking about living my life with no plan B. No plan B at all. Now, we know this story is a picture of God sacrificing his only son. And he, in fact, went through with that sacrifice. Of course, he lives again. He gave his only son so that we could all be saved. And we know that this is a picture of that, which is so beautiful. But I want to, for time's sake, recap a few things in the story. We're not going to read the entire thing, but it's found in Genesis chapter 22. And in verse 1, the passage says that God tested Abraham. God used what was about to happen to test Abraham. You know, I say to some of us, me included, that maybe when we face trials, God is testing us. He's not mad. He's not disappointed. Maybe He's putting our faith to the test. And rather than complain and get angry and frustrated and even begin to look for, plan B, maybe we should just trust and obey, because there's no other way. The Lord tells Abraham to take his only son, it says in Scripture, the one whom you love, your only son whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering. Wow, I cannot even imagine this request. On the tail end of being asked to take your only son that you love as a burnt offering, verse 3 says, so Abraham arose early in the morning to follow through with what God had asked him to do. See, if this was us, we would say, well, wait a minute. I'm going to have to send this to my friends, make sure everybody thinks this is a good idea. I'm going to have to get some opinions. I might need to pray and fast for, 6 months. I mean, I got to know that I know this was the voice of God. There are times in our life where we do need to confirm what we are feeling and get wisdom and counsel. Nothing wrong with that. But there are times when we know that God has spoken something to us. And like Abraham, God said, I want you to do this. And so it says, so Abraham arose early in the morning. He took his son. He took a couple of men with him. He took everything he would need. And it said that on the third day of their travels, he looked ahead and he saw the place where he was supposed to do this. And it says in verse 5, Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. I want you to mark that verse in your head, because we're going to come back to that here in just a second. Abraham goes on to take Isaac. He takes the wood, he takes the fire, and he even takes the knife, and they head to the place. And on the way, Isaac says, hey, Dad, are we missing something? Where's the animal that we're going to sacrifice? And Abraham says, oh, the Lord will provide. What a beautiful statement of trust. Abraham goes and he builds the altar. He binds up Isaac, puts him on the wood. He is ready to he pulls the knife back. He is ready to make this act. And in verse 11 and 12, it says that the angel came to him, and the angel said, Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And sure enough, Abraham lifts his eyes, and there is a ram. It goes on in verse 16 after this is over. It says, because you have done this, this was the angel of the Lord speaking again to Abraham. He said, because you've done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son. It says, blessing, I will bless you, and multiplying, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore, and your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. Because he obeyed, his blessings were going to be innumerable. Because he didn't withhold the thing that meant the most to him, the blessings of God were going to be multiplied and innumerable. Listen, obedience brings blessings in your life. Obedience brings reward. Destroy plan B. Get rid of plan B in your life today. Let me take you back as we close to verse 5. That said, stay here. Abraham said to his men, stay here. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. The lad and I were going to the mountain so I could sacrifice the lad. But he makes a statement of trust and faith in God. He says, but we will come back to you. There was something in Abraham that knew in this act of obedience, surely God is not going to require this of me. But he went ahead in full obedience, because he took the wood, he took the fire, he took the knife, he took everything necessary for the sacrifice. But his statement of faith was, we will come back down this mountain. There was an act of obedience in his heart. What confidence and trust. This was Abraham saying, there's no plan B. I'm all in, God. If this is what you require of me, I am all in. But my heart of faith says, we're coming back. What confidence and trust Abraham had in God. There's a quote that Samuel Rutherford said. He says, duties are ours and events are God. When our faith meddles with events and we hold God accountable for his providence and we begin to ask, how will you do this or that? We begin to lose ground. That's when we reach and look for plan B. Can I encourage you today? Destroy plan B. Focus your heart and your eyes intently on plan A. He died to give us plan A. Don't look for plan B. Don't look for an option. Trust and obey, because there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey.